Welcome, everyone. Just give it a few seconds as folks come in from our waiting room. All right. Well, everyone, hello and welcome. I'm Stephanie Rao, Executive Director at the National Council on Public History. We are a membership association dedicated to helping public historians put history to work in the world through community building, programs, and scholarship. Thank you for joining us today for the workshop Pedagogy and Public Memory, partnering with the Pomeroy Foundation on historical marker grants. Before turning things over to today's presenters, I just wanted to share a few housekeeping notes as we get started. This webinar is being recorded, and a link to that recording will be sent to everyone who has registered for it within the next few days. Closed captions are enabled for the presentation, and if you don't see them automatically, you can click the CC button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Feel free to use the chat area throughout the presentation to share where you're joining us from, to comment on the content that we're hearing today, or to share your additions as well. And if you have questions for our presenters, please share those using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Now it is my pleasure to introduce Bill Brower, the Executive Director of the William G. Pomeroy Foundation, to share a few words of welcome with us. Bill?
Hi, everybody. Special thanks to you, Stephanie, for your leadership and your enthusiasm about our work at the William G. Pomeroy Foundation. And thanks to you and your colleagues at NCPH for hosting us today. I am Bill Brower, the Executive Director of the Pomeroy Foundation. I've been here for a year after spending much of my career on college campuses as an advancement professional. I majored in history as an undergrad with a focus on recent US, so I feel right at home at the foundation and with you today. We are often asked why we do what we do in the historical marker space. It starts with our founder, Bill Pomeroy, one of the most curious, interested, and interesting people I've ever met. As a boy traveling in the family car, Bill's dad would often stop at historical markers and read them with Bill. They would talk about the history being marked. These experiences instilled a lifelong love of history, and when Bill started the foundation, he decided to invest in markers. 20 years later, the foundation is fast approaching 2,900 markers, which you will find in 49 states and Washington, D.C. Every Pomeroy marker tells a story, honors a legacy, and strengthens the fabric of a community. We're thrilled about the meeting you're having today, and I encourage you to think about the opportunities marker applications can provide for you, and if you are a professor on the call, for your students, and how together you can fill gaps in local history and tell stories that will evoke pride in place. It is great to be with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bill, and thank you to the William G. Pomeroy Foundation for partnering with us on this program today. Now it is my pleasure to introduce our facilitator for today, Susan Hughes. Susan is lead historian and archivist at the Pomeroy Foundation. She's worked in the public history sector for more than 30 years. At the Pomeroy Foundation, she oversees a wide range of historical marker programs and the research historians who support the marker applicants and grantees. Recognizing her many contributions to public history through her role at the Foundation, Susan is a recipient of the prestigious Hugh Hastings Award presented by the Association of Public Historians of New York State. Susan previously worked in the university archives at Syracuse University and as a regional archivist for the Documentary Heritage Program. Susan earned a BA from the University of Delaware and an MA in history with a public history concentration from Bowling Green State University, where she worked at the Center for Archival Collections. Susan, welcome, and I will turn it over to you.
Thank you for that warm introduction, Stephanie. I really appreciate it. And I'd also like to say thanks to the National Council on Public History for having us. We're really excited to lead this workshop today and discuss how to partner with the William G. Pomeroy Foundation to bring our historical marker research curriculum to your college or university. We'll begin our session today with a brief introduction of the Pomeroy Foundation, our mission, and the marker programs we offer nationwide. This will give you a sense of how we partner with communities to celebrate their local history with fully funded historical markers. And next, we'll introduce our national education program, which empowers students to learn about community history through primary source research projects that will result in grant-funded Pomeroy Markers. We recently expanded the curriculum to higher education so that faculty can incorporate the marker research and our grant application process into your courses. We also will discuss best practices for student-led grant applications, covering everything from selecting a strong topic to navigating primary sources. These are practical strategies that you can use when collaborating with us to guide your students to a successful marker grant application. Today's workshop will conclude with insights from our partner at the University of South Carolina. Dr. Jessica Elfenbein will share how she has piloted the curriculum with her graduate students, what worked, and how she addressed aligning coursework with the marker grant process. Our goal is for you to have a clear understanding of how the Pomeroy Foundation's marker grant research curriculum can benefit your students, your institution, and your community. If you're new to us, the Pomeroy Foundation is a private philanthropic organization established in Syracuse, New York, by entrepreneur and philanthropist, Bill Pomeroy. Our mission brings together Bill's two greatest passions in life, beating blood cancer and helping people celebrate their community's history with historical markers. Bill created the Pomeroy Foundation during his battle with acute myeloid leukemia. He found out the probability of survival wasn't the same for everyone and wanted to support others facing a similar situation. This was the impetus for our first initiative to improve the probability of finding appropriate donor matches or other life-saving treatments for blood cancer patients. The for history part of our mission aligns with Bill's lifelong passion, as Bill Brower told you before, for history going back to his childhood. When Bill learned that New York State had stopped funding its marker program decades ago and had left it to the communities to raise funds on their own, he sprang into action. That was the beginning of our first marker grant program, our New York program, and became the springboard for many more marker grant programs, as well as our national education program. At the Pomeroy Foundation, we help communities celebrate local history by providing fully funded grants for historical markers across several programs encompassing a diverse range of themes. Since 2005, the Foundation has awarded nearly 2,900 grants for markers and plaques across the United States, all the way to Alaska. And if there's anybody here from Hawaii, we'd love to have you too. That's the one state we're missing. Pomeroy markers are fully funded and cover the entire cost of the marker, pole, and shipping. Applicants must apply through a local 501c3 organization, such as a historical society or a nonprofit academic institution. You can also apply through a local, state, or federal government entity or tribal nation. Communities benefit from historical markers. They educate the public, they inspire pride of place, and they promote historical and cultural tourism. After the marker is installed, communities celebrate by hosting dedication ceremonies. These special events bring people together, including local partner organizations and public officials. And in the photo here, you can see Hagerstown, Maryland Mayor in the center there in the pink jacket at the dedication of this particular marker. And they also do attract media attention. By obtaining a marker, you're doing a service for your community and the public at large. The inscription on your marker is important and will stand for generations to come. Using primary sources is what sets Pomeroy Markers apart. Our team of professional historians carefully vet the primary sources to verify the historical facts presented on each marker. This ensures that every marker meets our gold standard for accuracy. Applicants often tell us how much they value this process. Student-led marker applications receive the same rigorous review as all the other grants. Let's introduce you to the Pomeroy Foundation's 6 signature marker programs, 4 of which are currently available through the National Education Program. Those eligible programs are Hometown Heritage, Hungry for History, Historic Transportation, and our New York State Historical Marker Program. Every marker grant program that we offer has a page on our website, wgpfoundation.org, where you can learn more about the criteria, guidelines, and how to apply. So Hometown Heritage, as you see here in this photo, is our national marker program that commemorates people, places, things, or events historically significant to the larger community and beyond. It seeks to capture local history, especially for those in states without marker programs, or for subjects which may not qualify for that state's marker program, and helps you preserve important historic milestones. To be eligible, markers must recognize a historical fact that occurred more than 100 years from the year of the application, so currently 1925. The emblem at the top of the marker will display an outline of the state where the marker is placed. You can see the example here is from Asheboro, North Carolina. There we go. Change next one. Hungry for History. This is a fun program. This celebrates America's food history by telling the stories of local and regional food specialties around the United States. It celebrates significant food dishes created prior to 1970 and the role they've played in defining American culture and forging community identity. It highlights dishes such as salt potatoes in Syracuse, as you can see the marker here in that photo. Onion burgers in El Reno, Oklahoma. Sopressata in Westerly, Rhode Island, and Smith Island cake, the Maryland state dessert. The criteria are ready-to-eat dishes with a minimum of 2 ingredients or dishes composed of a single food item that can be found within a local specific location or region, such as Blue Point oysters in the Great South Bay off of Long Island. Created prior to 1970, the dishes must have been historically significant to the greater community or beyond prior to the application. Dishes or a variation of it should have local or regional origins, but it's not necessarily for it to have been invented there or be the first place it was eaten. We were looking more for cultural significance. And the dish must be available and still eaten today. Plus, we've included a couple of the categories, non-alcoholic drinks, thinking of, I think somebody there was from Boston, thinking of ice creams, and food-related events or festivals must still be held at the time of the application. For example, we gave a marker to the Preston County Buckwheat Festival in Kingwood, West Virginia, which has been held since 1938. More fundraisers that are held specifically for fundraising do not qualify for this. And historic transportation is another nationwide program which commemorates railroads, bridges and tunnels, canals, and aviation. The subject must be a fact that occurred by 1945. You can see here a railroad station in Larchmont, New York, which is now a Girl Scout meeting house. So we're often asked, why not roads? We established this nationwide program to bring greater attention to transportation history. After World War II, the United States saw a significant change in transportation with the increase in automobile ownership and the construction of the interstate highway system. We want to acknowledge and celebrate the way in which goods and people were transported prior to these events, which transformed society so significantly. Next is our New York State Historic Program. This is our flagship program, and it again commemorates historic people, places, or things within the time frame of 1683 to 1925, or 100 years before the application year. So again, currently 1925. So this is the model for our Hometown Heritage program. It began in 2006, and we've awarded over 1,200 markers across the state's 62 counties. Here you can see 2 high school students from Arlington High School in Wappinger Falls, New York, and their class was the one who was awarded this marker along with their social studies teacher. The last two are not part of the education program, but I just wanted to make you aware of them in case you have individuals who might be interested in applying. The Legends and Lore is one of our most popular marker programs. It commemorates subjects including folk tales like Champy the Lake Monster in Lake Champlain, legends like John Henry in West Virginia, or folklore subjects like folk singer Margaret MacArthur in Vermont. You can learn more about eligible categories on the Legends and Lore marker page on our website. The photo you see here is some students from Utah State University with their professor, and this photo is in Garden City, Utah. So we are currently working on a survey with our folklore organization partners to get feedback about the potential for expanding legends and lore into our national education curriculum. So keep an eye on our website and social media for that. And last but not least is our National Register. When a property or district is placed on the National Register of Historic Places, the designation does not include funding or for a plaque or sign. So as a result, many nonprofit or municipalities don't have a signage due to the cost. We bridge that gap by providing grants so public properties and historic districts can commemorate their placement and share this achievement. This is the easiest application process, and you can apply any time of year. Applicants can choose between a roadside marker. The one you see here is in Stonington, Maine. And we also have two styles of plaques if you want to mount it on a building. It requires only the designation letter. There really isn't any research. It's not at this point included in the education program because there is no research involved in it, but it's just one more way to help communities mark their history. Our national education program, what we're all here for. I'd like to now turn our attention to that program, which is now being revised specifically for higher education institutions. This initiative turns historical research into applied learning experiences where students conduct original primary source research, prepare a grant application, and, if successful, see their work culminate in a fully funded historical marker, as you can see these high school students here. For educators, the program offers a structured curriculum that can be integrated into courses in history, public history, American studies, and other related disciplines. Sequential lessons that support teaching research skills, historical writing, grant writing, and civic literacy. Experiential outcomes that give students not just the classroom knowledge, but a public contribution to their community in the form of a Pomeroy marker. While originally designed with high school students in mind, we're adapting the materials for higher education thanks to our pilot program, which you're going to hear about shortly, with the University of South Carolina, and feedback from faculty around the country. The new materials will include a sample syllabus, schedule, timeline, and tip sheets, and faculty-friendly presentations. These resources will help align the marker grant process with semester schedules and course objectives. The result is a unique, hands-on experience where students can see the impact of their research and exposure to grant writing, which takes the form of a fully funded historical marker. So how do you get started? Start a conversation with us, and we will provide you with a sample curriculum and packet of supporting materials. When embedding a marker grant program into your course, there's a few essentials to keep in mind. First, we will provide you with a full set of resources. Again, sample syllabus, schedule, and teaching materials, so you don't have to start from scratch. Our staff are available to answer questions anytime during our Monday through Friday business hours by email, phone, or Zoom, or even Teams. Students begin by submitting a letter of intent through our online portal, which allows us to review their topics and provide feedback early on. Each class can submit up to 5 applications, and our historians carefully review the sources, text, and land permissions. Because marker fabrication takes time, the project may continue beyond the semester, with the educator serving as the point of contact. We'll guide you through the process, including installation and dedication. So the key takeaway, this is a structured, flexible framework that can fit into your course while giving students a meaningful public history outcome. All marker inscriptions must be supported by primary source documentation, with the exception of legends and lore. This ensures markers are historically accurate, reliable, and educational for today and future generations. You must include key dates to provide context. Remember, not everybody knows when the Civil War took place, for example, especially if you haven't learned about that yet in 5th grade. We ask you to avoid vague terms such as 20th century, but circa dates are acceptable if you can't pin the date down exactly. Clearly cite and label all sources and highlight relevant text. Your inscription should tell a clear story to visitors who may know nothing about the subject. We want that text to be accessible to those as young as 5th grade, to new Americans, and to those visiting from outside the state or even the country. Marker must be installed near the original structure or site of the historical event. Applications for structures that no longer exist or are slated for removal will unfortunately not be successful. We want the text of the story to be what history happened here and to show the importance of place. Ensure the site is publicly accessible and safe for visitors. The foundation does not approve markers that require trespassing on private property, I think for obvious reasons. The placement should be visible from the road with a safe pullover or walking access for visitors. We have our style guide online, so please use all 5 lines to tell a clear and engaging story. Please avoid jargon, professional specific abbreviations, or language that only insiders would understand. The foundation has a distinct voice for our markers that we've developed over the years. And again, you can review the style guide handout for guidance. Please focus on clarity and accuracy rather than perfect wording. We will give you feedback and support on that. We've been doing this for a number of years, and we know how difficult it is to get everything into 5 lines, 27 characters each. So we're happy to help. If you visit wgpfoundation.org, you can explore existing markers, and this will help you understand the scope and style of historically significant subjects and provide inspiration for your own markers. The map can guide you in identifying locations with existing markers versus sites that may be eligible for a new marker. So again, review the guidelines for the chosen marker grant program before applying to ensure eligibility. Applications are all completed online. Create an account if your organization is not already in the database. Most programs require a letter of intent as the first step, including your proposed inscription and a list of primary sources. You do not need to include the primary sources with your letter of intent. Feedback is provided after your submission. We want you to focus on historical accuracy and clarity. The foundation, again, as I said, will help you refine the final wording. So we are going to hold questions until the end of the presentation. And at this time, I'd like to introduce you to our next speakers. Leading the way with our curriculum in higher education at the University of South Carolina are Professor Jessica Elfenbein and G.C. Ramey. Jessica is a historian and faculty leader whose research spans American urban, environmental, and business history. Her work includes award-winning public history projects such as Baltimore 68, Riots and Rebirth, and the Wood Basket of the World project. At the University of South Carolina, she has served as chair of the history department and senior associate dean of the graduate school. G.C. Ramey is a PhD and MA student at the University of South Carolina with a passion for storytelling and oral history. His research explores marginalized labor in the American whiskey industry. He currently serves as a research assistant on public history projects, including one under Jessica's guidance on South Carolina's lumber industry through the Foundation's Historical Marker program.
Thank you. Good afternoon, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. So as Susan said, I'm Jessica Elfenbein. I've been a longtime NCPH member and lurker, a former board member, and a public history practitioner for the last 30 years or so. But I had had no previous historical marker experience or knowledge. So this slide that we're looking at here is the homepage for It's the homepage for this project that we're working on called Wood Basket of the World, which looks at the history of lumber, wood products, and forest conservation in South Carolina, which turns out to be this particularly important topic, although it's a hidden in plain sight story. And this is a multifaceted project. You can see by looking at the top, we have digitized collections, we have a traveling and virtual exhibition, we have an oral history project, we have an anthology that's coming out in the next few months. We're doing deep community mapping and so on. We've worked with a lot of community partners and a lot of students, hundreds of students at this point in more than a half dozen classes. And so as we thought about ways to tell this story, which is not, it helps you to read the landscape, but it's not part of the narrative that is told about our place, all of a sudden historical markers seemed like a very good idea. And I want to do a shout out because I discovered the William G. Pomeroy Foundation in 2023 at the NCPH meeting in Atlanta, where the Pomeroy Foundation had a table and promotional materials, and I picked up a brochure and I thought it looked interesting. And then I started looking into historical markers and how we might use them in a graduate seminar. And I reached out also, and I think this is important. Most states through your SHPO office offer some kind of state historical marker program. But to Susan's point, in many cases, not just in New York's, but also in South Carolina's, they approve marker text, but they don't fund the markers. And Susan and Bill have been very delicate. I'll be less delicate. In the state of South Carolina, putting up a state-approved marker runs in the neighborhood of $3,000 to $3,500 per marker. And if you're doing this with multiple markers, it gets expensive very quickly. And so that was a concern for us because it with the Pomeroy Foundation providing full funding and allowing our students the opportunity to apply for a real grant, that seemed like a good idea. But I didn't want to eclipse our SHPO office. And so something that I'll mention here that may be useful to those of you who are teaching either at the undergraduate or graduate level is that I invited in our SHPO officer who does have state responsibility for historical markers. And he went over the state marker program with the students. And then to echo what Susan said earlier, we also had the Pomeroy staff come via Zoom to class to talk about the Pomeroy Foundation's historical marker program. So students were pretty clear on both. I have a little bibliography for anybody who is teaching at the graduate level. I think helping your students to understand the history of historical markers is very helpful. So we're very lucky in South Carolina. We have a guidebook to South Carolina's historical markers, and we did have its author come to class. And then there are some other good articles out there on the history of various states' marker programs, particularly good one on Virginia, which was one of the pioneers in that space. So we did all of that. So I was trying to give students methods information about historical markers and at the same time provide content knowledge on the topic that we were going to do marker applications around, which was the history of lumber, wood products, and forest conservation. And that's where it gets dicey because we're trying to allow graduate students to develop as professional historians, and they need time enough to develop enough content knowledge to do it well. And in a 14 or 15-week semester, it is very hard to do both. Any of you who have done community engaged learning know what I'm talking about. It doesn't have to be historical markers, but the quality control really does become the responsibility of the faculty member. And so if you sign up to do this, please understand that your job with these markers will not be done at the end of the semester. And that's not a bad thing, it's just a thing. Because even with the help of the Pomeroy Foundation, it is hard to fit it in to the semester. So having said that, this work was part of one of our core courses for our public history program. We have a master's program that this year is celebrating its 50th anniversary. Oh, and I'll put in a plug here for the University of South Carolina. We have a fully funded master's program. So if any of you have undergraduate students interested in a master's in public history, please know that we have full funding for them. In any case, there were 9 students enrolled in History 788, which is titled Memory, History, and Space, this spring. And GC will go into some more detail, but they each had to come up with their own topic for a historical marker. We were really so grateful to the Pomeroy staff for their pre-planning and for their ongoing support. And I will spend just 2 more minutes or so before I turn it over to GC, but the challenges that we faced in this course were several, and I'll just mention what they were here. I mentioned one already, which is that the funder's timeline doesn't necessarily align with academic semesters. I think we've worked pretty hard to make that better for the next set of graduate students who do try to do this work. But it is complicated because of the need for content knowledge and because your students need to have agency to find their own topics. I think to this point, my understanding is that the Pomeroy Foundation has worked with K-12 a lot, but there the teacher is telling the children what the topics are going to be. In the case of graduate students, you know, they're budding professional historians. We don't want to do that. And it takes a little while for them to develop adequate content knowledge to be able to make a thoughtful proposal. And I would mention also something that Susan mentioned before. I'll just elaborate on it a little bit. In order for an application to move forward, your students will need to gather land permissions from the property owners. And that's an unpredictable process because some people are very agreeable from the get-go and the letter is done by 5 o'clock today, and other people take a lot of nudging, just like in the real world. And students can't control this part of the process. So just know that that's the way it is. It has to get done, and it may or may not get done within the semester. And I will also say from our experience, the 100-year rule, which we respect very much from the Pomeroy Foundation, is one that the students in my class seem to think was more flexible than the foundation intended for it to be. And please respect it right from the beginning, and you'll save some heartache for yourself and your students. The things that were great about this were that students have had the opportunity to do a real-world grant application, and when successful, can then claim that they themselves have been sole author, or if they're working in teams, part of a team that applied for and was awarded a grant. And, you know, like what better professional development practice is there than that? So that was great. I will simply close with a couple of ideas for success, some solutions to the problems that I've mentioned, and some things that worked very well for us. We got very lucky, and there was a local history conference held a little after the midpoint in the semester. And so students presented at the local history conference. And in some ways that was really good because it was another real world, hard timeline, no flexibility. You got 11 o'clock when we've been scheduled, and you have to go in knowing what it is you're planning to do. So this was where they got to make their elevator pitches for the work that they'd then submit to the Pomeroy Foundation. And I think that went very well. You know, again, we don't always have control over where local history conferences take place, but for many of my students, it was their first experience at a conference. And these regional or local history conferences are great because they're smaller and less intimidating for students, and they get lots more attention because you're doing place-based work. So that worked very, very well. And I think it worked well because it underscored accountability and the need for students to be able to advocate and support choices that they were making. The last thing, and this will be the transition to GC Ramey, is that the work could not get finished during the semester. Now, maybe it'll get easier going forward as the Pomeroy Foundation develops helpful tools for the classroom. But I would also recommend anybody who's thinking about doing this, think about putting aside, if you can find some funding for a research assistant, because once the semester ends, your student's obligation to the work stops. It stops. And by having GC, who was himself a student in the class, then work with his colleagues, it was a really nice transition. Whereas I think if I had been the person, it would have felt like I was riding herd on students to do work where their obligation to me had ended, and they might have felt obliged, but not for the right reasons. And so I'm glad I didn't have to do that. And I was glad also that we have been able to provide for GC a paid experience, a professional experience in public history. He's been the frontline person who has been working with the staff at the Pomeroy Foundation to polish and finish these grant applications. And the very last thing that I'll say is that this is a kind of experience that does require a lot of pre-planning on the part of the instructor. This process really is not appropriate for anybody who likes to do things at the last minute. So I warn you away from that. If you know yourself and that's how you operate, don't start with this yet, I would say. But I would also add to that, what it really has done is strengthen community partnerships. We went in with pretty good community partnerships. We come out with even better community partnerships. So that's been terrific. And because we're trying to tell a story that's been grossly undertold, that is part of a state narrative, our goal is that these markers, and we'll end up, we think, with 7 markers, that the markers will trigger inquiry into topics that, while ubiquitous across our state, are grossly under-researched. And we're hopeful that these markers will allow other people to sort of pick up the load and work with us to answer some questions that we probably should have been asking for decades, but haven't. So thank you for your time. And I'd like now to turn it over to GC Ramey, without whose help we would not be here today.
Hey, I just want to say thank you so much for having me. This has been just a terrific experience as a graduate student to get this opportunity. As was shared before, I am a PhD student at the University of South Carolina. And what I want to really lean in on is my background in literature, because it is storytelling that I hoped to bring to the table with public history, especially through these markers. I am from the state of South Carolina, and there were so many of the historical topics related to the lumber industry that I had no idea about, having lived, I'm going to date myself. I'm 35 years old, and in the entire time that I've lived here, these are stories that were hidden in plain sight, but I was just not able to know that story yet. And so being able to participate in telling it in a public forum was just a tremendous experience. Let me first start with talking about the project origins from the student perspective. I want to say Dr. Elfenbein was a wonderful professor for a class like this. Not only is she a person who understands the theoretical, which is really my interest. Intellectually, I am interested in this theory of history, memory, and place. She knows this, and she picked, great monographs and great secondary sources that help teach us these basic foundational literatures that we needed to know before entering the project. But she also has on-the-ground experience with doing public history. And one of her talents is being able to bring together various people and to utilize people for their strengths and their talents. And she doesn't try to do it all on her own. That worked out so wonderful for students who are, we're chomping at the bit to get this early experience with public history. And so this was just a tremendous mentor to have on that. As you can see, the assignment in the course, Memory, History, and Space, was to identify this original topic that related to South Carolina's lumber industry, use primary sources, and then complete a historic marker application for the William G. Pomeroy Foundation Hometown Heritage Program. This next map will kind of show you a little bit of where we ended up with some of these markers. I want to make a quick note here. One thing that was interesting is that a lot of us would probably not say that the lumber industry was our historical interest. I happened to get lucky and research Brooklyn Cooperage Company. And although they do not make, or they weren't known for making whiskey barrels, they did make a few. As a subsidiary of the American Sugar Refining Company, they made sugar barrels. And so I was able to tie my historical interest, the history of industry, the history of labor to my project. Other students were not quite as lucky in that, but I think that there was still value, even if it was a complete, derailment from what your historical interests are. It is the practical skills. I mentioned earlier that I like the theory. When I walked into the class, I did not expect to actually leave wanting more experience on the practical side of things. I thought learning the theoretical side would be sufficient for me. I could hopefully get an A in the course, move on, and forget lumber history ever happened. And now I find myself invested. I'm now considering, adding an element of cooperage and industry through Sumter into maybe my dissertation. And so these are the types of things that happen when you get the hands-on experience in this unique way. Our markers, you can see that they do look very diverse, very distinct. And if you see each marker individually, you might wonder how it relates to a larger framework. We have 3 markers in Sumter that relate to various industries, including, like I said, the cooperage, but also worker migrations and Williams Furniture. We have 2 in Utahville, one that relates to the early lumber company led by Francis Beidler. We have one that relates to the Utahville Railroad. We have one that centers around public health, Dr. James De Portes. I'll talk a little bit about him in a case study in just a minute. And then down with the Audubon Francis Beidler Forest. And so 4 distinct locations, 7 distinct topics. What's interesting here is that individually, they do not appear to be interconnected. But when you look at them from sort of this macro level, and you can see the way that they actually interweave together, what's interesting is that the land that the Santee River Cypress Lumber Company sold, they sold it to the Brooklyn Cooperage Company. The train station, the Utahville Railroad, one of the reasons that Brooklyn Cooperage Company chose to put their location in 1927 in Sumter, South Carolina, was partly because of the infrastructure through rail. So you see all of these interconnections and this larger framework. It reminds me of like a quilt. Like each student had their own patch. We presented the patch, we applied it to this larger fabric, and then when you step back, you see this cohesive narrative that talks about this history of lumber, of all things, lumber. What's more remarkable, I think, than even sort of the macro view of industry in the state is when we then, understanding the cohesive look of things, re-zoom back into the micro. Each one of these markers tells deeper stories about workers, individuals, communities. And I think that's where my heart is telling those stories. And so it was really a great experience there. Let me talk a little bit about the student experience overall, because I do have sort of 2 unique perspectives, one as a student and one as a research assistant. I think first, from the student perspective, is going in and expecting to learn one thing, but then being thrust into this idea of I get to participate in something meaningful was a treasure. I think that if I were to really be honest and candid with you and assess who I was entering the class, I really wanted an easy semester. I'll be honest. I wanted, to do my work and to, see what could happen. But more than anything, I was hoping that the actual workload would be less, and maybe I wouldn't have to, try too hard, and I could focus on my research interest in other areas. Stepping away from that, now I look back and I'm thankful for the challenges that I faced, and the practical experience, because not only did I manage to pass the course and move closer to this degree that I'm pursuing, but I also have resume experience now. I was able to network with community partners. I was able to cooperate with my classmates, and we were able to build these strong peer groups as we continue to work towards this overarching story of lumber history. I want to transition now kind of into the research experience because it's a little different. So as a research assistant, I was hired to take the markers that were available. They were in various states. Some of them were more finished, others were not quite there. Some of them really just needed to be reworked completely. And some of them I'm still continuing to work on, as we speak. I want to say a quick shout out to Anastasia for the work that she does. She's with the William G. Pomeroy Foundation, and she has been a treasure. I mean, truly, she has helped when I was a student, and then she's helped me as this research assistant, and it has just been a wonderful experience. I've learned so much from her, and so I just want to say thank you to her. I think one of the big takeaways here is I thought handling a single marker was difficult, but handling 7 and all of the logistics of land permissions and all of the challenges that would arise with each of these locations, it was arduous. And I'll say it challenged me in ways that forced me to grow. And I don't know how many students are on this, but I will encourage students, every class you take, even if it's a class that you're not sure is going to help you with your major or whatever your interest is, it is an opportunity for personal and professional growth. You really get out what you put into it. The other thing I would say with it is I learned professional skills that I didn't expect moving into this. And so I was thankful to be able to say that I am now a little more competent and a little more confident with project management, my own time management. My research skills are really strengthening. And as I work towards completing a public history master's and then eventually my dissertation, I think that those are skills that I will see just really come in handy in basically everything I do from this point on. Let's talk about the challenges. I think that this is the big part here. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It was difficult. Let's be honest. Identifying a topic in an industry or a history that you're not really well versed in, and then gathering the research, finding who owns property, putting these things together, all while you're still trying to learn the secondary literature about that topic was really difficult. However, I think it's those challenges are the reasons that I love the course so much. It is difficult. And I think that when I'm discussing challenges in this next section, I just want to give you 3 quick ideas, takeaways, things that, I'm thinking about when I'm looking at the challenges that I faced. First of all, if those of you on the call are practicing public historians or work in any other field, challenges are part of the game. There is no career that you're going to work in where you're not going to face a challenge. And so being able to be thrust into this class setting and face these challenges as a student has value that I think is going to prove incredibly beneficial to all of our careers in the future. Number 2, I think there's something valuable about being able to face these challenges in a safe environment. We had someone like Dr. Elfenbein who was able to be there, to give us support, to mentor. We had great peers. We were able to ask advice from other students who are further along in the process or have more experience. That is crucial. Being able to even fail in a controlled environment, that builds the confidence that we need moving forward. Lastly, I'll say that with every challenge that we face, the challenge itself, yes, it is interesting, but the reward from those challenges come not with just facing it and giving up, but facing it and finding a way to overcome them. To do that, it built skills for me personally in cooperation. I was forced at first, and then I really liked it. Working with my peers, it helped me with networking, collaboration with community partners. I was able to meet city planners from Sumter, have great relationships with them, met various business owners as I was looking and trying to get these property permissions and whatnot. And stepping away from it, those two things were valuable. The last thing, and I think it's probably the most notable of all, the most significant, is creative problem solving. We had to be creative. I will quickly give you a quick case study. We had one marker that was related to public health. The student wanted to, and her name is Madison Bukowski, wonderful student, amazing. It was a great idea. And I spoke to her about this, told her I was going to share this and got her permission for it. There was a couple challenges with her project. Just to give you a quick backstory with it, she wanted to research Ferguson, South Carolina, which is a mill town that was built for the Santee River Cypress Lumber Company. It, housed the resident workers there. It was right in the middle of this swampland of the Santee River where it was plenty of mosquitoes, malaria was an issue. She wanted to research the hospital of Ferguson, South Carolina. There's a couple challenges there. First is that the records are either destroyed or lost, and they are completely submerged under Lake Marion in the early 1940s when the hydroelectric dam decided to flood the area of Ferguson. We lost a lot of great artifacts there. And so not being able to use those archives, it's difficult. The other thing is when our goal is to tie memory, history with a specific physical place, where do you put a marker if the hospital is under a lake? And so what seems like a dead end, we were able to be creative, reframe it. And I used the original research that Maddie did. She found that the physician of the hospital, Dr. James Deportes, had an incredible medical experience. Once he finished working at Ferguson, he ended up serving as president of the South Carolina Medical Association. He is highly regarded in Fort Mill, South Carolina. His home is a historic property, and this is an incredible story. And so I was able to take the name that she found, use census records to build this historical biography, and hopefully, if this one gets approved, we're able to reframe this dead end, this challenge, into a creative narrative that talks about not just what this person did in Ferguson, but the history, the life that he lived. And what's really cool about that story is when I talked to the Fort Mill City Council, they had no idea. They knew who he was, but they had no idea that he served this integrated workforce down in Ferguson, South Carolina. And so that was really cool. The last thing I have for you is just a couple takeaways. This is just from my personal experience. First, I'll say that if you are a professor or someone considering this, let me just say that historical markers, especially through the William G. Pomeroy Foundation, offers a great way to put theory into practice. Secondly, to students who are listening, remember that challenges are good. It forces you to grow. Do not run away from challenges, face them. That is how you're going to grow your competency and your confidence. Lastly, I'll say that with everything that I experienced, I was able to move away from this a better historian. And that is sort of my final statement, is that in public history, probably more than anything else, you get out what you put into it. And so if you face a challenge and decide to quit, that's all you get. You face a challenge and decide to be creative and reinvent the wheel and find a new way through, then you're going to be able to see the reward physically planted as a historical marker. And I really hope that that's the case. I just want to say thank you for having me on here. Here's our contact information. In the middle is a QR code for the overall project, the Wood Basket of the World. And there's Dr. Elfenbein and my email addresses. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, GC and Jessica and Susan, for this great presentation. We have about 5 minutes left, so we can get through a few questions. So don't forget, you can enter those either in the Q&A function or you can enter them into the chat. So the first question that we have is, I think, for Susan. And the question is from, is there funding available to revise existing historical markers?
We do that all the time, especially here in New York, where the marker program started about 1929 and was very active up until World War II. What we ask is that, first of all, you get permission to take the old marker down from the municipality or the organization that owns it. You will still have to go through the application process to provide primary sources, but it's a great opportunity to update facts that have been uncovered since maybe 1930, when that marker first went up, to update language, to maybe add some. Maybe there's not a whole lot of story told on there, and you can tell some more of the story by a marker. So yes, just because there's an existing marker, if you want to replace it, we just let us know. You need to show us permission that you're going to get to take the old one down. And yes, we will do a replacement through any of our regular marker programs.
Wonderful. Thank you, Susan. The next question, I think, is mostly for Jessica. Jessica, if you were to think about engaging with this national education program with the Pomeroy Foundation with undergraduate students, what changes would you anticipate making to how you would set up the curriculum for that?
Yeah, I think for undergraduate students, I might pre-select potential topics and give them kind of a bird's eye view of what those might be. I wouldn't do the research for them. I mean, I would have done enough pre-research to know that there was adequate research out there, and not leave them, as we did the graduate students, to figure it all out themselves. But I would provide choice and then let them run with it, I think, because there would not be time in the semester for them to be able to do this otherwise.
Wonderful. Thank you. Another question, Susan. Am I correct in thinking that the Pomeroy education program is not appropriate for high school level classes, even particularly enthusiastic ones? It sounds like quite a commitment, even for graduate level courses.
We do have specific lesson plans for high school students, and that's where we started out. And we actually had a high school teacher write those lesson plans for us. So what we're doing now with Jessica and getting feedback from other professors and graduate students is expanding it into the college level. But yes, it is definitely appropriate for high school students. It's different. And you're right, it's not as rigorous because they're high school students. They're not budding professionals who are expected to do much more of the work on their own.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. We had another question. What is the material of the markers?
All the markers are cast aluminum. They have a baked on powder coated paint with a UV coating. So if you're concerned about weather, we have some that are on, shorelines along Long Island and so forth, where they're getting pelted with the winter winds and the sand. Of course, here in upstate New York and Minnesota, some of these other places, they're getting pelted with, the snow and the sand. So we have what I would say is state of the art. We have looked for the best and most durable coatings and working with foundries that provide that kind of thing. So it's really, I don't want to brag, but it's really the best you can get. I will brag. They are the best you can get.
Wonderful. Thank you. And I think there's a great comment in the chat that says, for what it's worth, undergraduates are great candidates to help revise existing historical markers as the topic is already selected for them. And I think we have time for one more question, which I would love to get all three of your perspective on from your different roles in this kind of work, which is, what kind of topics are an especially good fit for the Hometown Heritage Marker Grant program?
Well, I'll start. What is your what is your locality known for? What was it known for? I think GC gave a really great presentation on discovering the history of that region of South Carolina that so many people, especially younger people, don't know nothing about. So how did your city, how did your region, how did it form? What kind of industries were there? I think asking the people, asking your relatives, asking the teachers in town, asking the people who've lived there for a long time. What do you think about this town? Are there people there that are unknown that really, helped build this town, maybe even helped build our nation? That need to be remembered and have been kind of, forgotten over the years because no one's studying them. So again, I would encourage people to go and look at our marker map and see some of the wonderful ideas that people have come up with all over the United States.
Jessica or JC, did you have anything to add from your perspectives doing the research and coordinating the work?
Yeah, I'll say real fast. If you have an interest in history, the fun part is that curiosity about the world around you, whether it's at the national level, international level, state level, local level. And if you have an interest in something, whatever it is, I didn't know that I could research whiskey history. And then all of a sudden I was told that I could, and it was a game changer for me. And I think that whatever your interest is that there's a history there and there's stories to be told. And one good place to look is in the stories from those who have voices that are not being heard as often or those that are underrepresented. And I think that that's a really good place to start.
I would just say that I think biographical research is very helpful to the process of finding hometown heritage stories that might be worthy of a marker, especially because doing biographical research has gotten so much easier with the advent of Ancestry and newspapers.com. And so you could have, if there's a particular municipality or whatever, you can certainly have students at any level, I'd say from probably 9th or 10th grade on, read a year of newspaper accounts of that place. And that might begin to generate stories. And then they're going to be able, certainly at the undergraduate and graduate level, they can do the biographical research on the people involved in the stories and see if there's something that's worthy there. And then I would try to marry that to whatever kinds of local scholarly sources might exist. And then you begin to have a brew that would be, I think, probably very effective almost anywhere.
Wonderful, thank you. We have one last question that just came in under the wire. Has it been feasible to have as an undergraduate or graduate individual special topics class? Susan, or Jessica, I didn't know if you had thoughts about what that would look.
I think if I had a very motivated student who wanted to do this, I'd be very happy to work with the student. And yeah, I think it would be a great culminating project. And for a place like the University of South Carolina with an honors college that requires theses, but the theses can be creative, and this is at the undergraduate level, something like this could be a creative undergraduate thesis project for somebody who wanted to pursue it. Sure, I think it would be a good idea.
Wonderful, thank you. Thank you so much to Susan, Jessica, and GC for joining us today and sharing your knowledge and experiences with us. Thank you, Bill, for your words of welcome. Thanks to you, all of our attendees who joined us today. As a reminder, we have recorded this presentation and we will follow up with all of you in the next few days to share that out. And I hope that some of you will be able to join us in October. As we have so many faculty and students here, NCPH will be hosting our first ever virtual grad fair for public history. So we would love to see faculty have your programs represented, and if you have undergraduate students, who you think might be interested in public history, please encourage them. It is free for them to participate and attend. So thank you again, everyone. Susan, Jessica, GC, it was a pleasure to learn from you. Thank you so much and have a great afternoon, everyone.